So let's talk about that, what it means, what's involved. Yeah. First we'll do a little prayer, set things in the right direction. The first two lines of the prayer are expressing our reliance on the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. Those of us who figure we're already Buddhist, and if you do take refuge, it's like you're formally, it's like Buddhist baptism. No water involved, no pools to dunk in. So those of us who have this already in our minds, we remind ourselves of our reliance on the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. The first two lines, and the second two lines are expressing this kind of spacious, altruistic reason. The Tibetans would say motivation, but we'd say reason or purpose for being together, to listen to these teachings, to think about the meaning, to see if we can take something away from it, to put into our lives as tools to help us develop our marvelous potential, so we can be a benefit to others. Thinking like that. Sangye charang soke chognam la chanchu baru dagni kyapsuchi dagi chonyen gipe sonam ki jola penche sangye drupa shog sangye charang soke chognam la chanchu baru dagni kyapsuchi dagi chonyen gipe sonam ki jola penche sangye drupa shog sangye charang soke chognam la chanchu baru dagni kyapsuchi Dagi chonyen gipe sonam ki jola penche sangye drupa shog. Well, yeah, refuge, as they call it. It's a nice word, actually, refuge. You take refuge in something, you know, sort of to support you and protect you, isn't it? It's a nice idea. So I suppose from the Buddhist perspective, you know, let's say, especially for us in the West or in this part of the world where Buddhism is not native, you know, and you're looking for a spiritual path and you wander here and you wander there. That's what we do. And then you listen to the Buddhist teachings and you think, that's nice, that's interesting. That's what happened to me. I first heard the teachings and I was about 32 or something, 31 in Australia in the mid-70s. I remember hearing different things and going to these teachings of Lama Zopa Rinpoche. And even though it was confusing to me, especially very confusing, I know what they were talking about half the time, but there's something about it that resonated for me. It was very felt to me, you know, my path, I think. So, and then at some point when you feel confident, you know, then you would commit, you know, it's like a formal commitment. So the formality of it is very interesting. I think taking formal steps in certain things, I think helps our mind. It's internal really, but externalizing it formally, I think often, you know, I think for people who have a relationship, you know, a formal once it would have been called marriage, even if you don't do it legally, there's something meaningful, isn't there? People coming and sort of speaking to each other, an agreement, you know, it somehow makes it more powerful, I think. Something about that I think is helpful, because and also we're creatures of shape and structure, aren't we? So the whole job of so-called being a Buddhist, having a spiritual path, is a totally internal thing, you know. It includes external things because we have body and speech, but really it's an internal path. But somehow I think because we need shape and form, sometimes it helps our mind, you know. So what we'll be doing is it's very short. It takes 5 minutes to do the thing itself. Or you repeat after me certain words, and you commit. You know, you're committing to, you know, you're using me as a reference point. I'm like representing the Buddha for you. You know, you'd say it like that. And I like this very much. There's something very powerful about it, that I received this from my teacher, who got it from their teacher, who got it from their teacher. And if it's a valid lineage of any information, then you can track it back, you know, to a source in an unbroken chain of human beings. Like my mother was a musician. Bach's dead, you know. She taught me Bach. Where'd she get it from? Her teacher. Where'd she get it from? Her teacher. Where'd they get it from? Their teacher. And you could track it back in an unbroken chain of human knowledge, human minds, right back to Bach. That's powerful. That's called a lineage. We relate to that, you know. I mean, it has some, it's not just made up by some Joe. It tracks itself back in living knowledge. I like that a lot. Like a power source we plug into, you know. I like that. So what is it that what is a Buddhist then? How would you define a Buddhist? Well, I mean, that you have to know what Buddhism means, if that's the case. If you're going to be a Buddhist, you want to know what Buddhism means. So there's different stages of Buddhist practice, different stages. And one way you could say is there's different levels of spiritual development, which in Buddhist terms is mental development, psychological. Psychological and spiritual in Buddhism are virtually the same. It's a really crucial point to understand. There's not a separate component called a soul, and then you have psychology. No, for Buddha, mind is his expertise. You know, so it's the development of your mind that's this process of spiritual development. This is a really crucial point to get. So there's different levels that we can accomplish. You know, so the long-term goal, if you're a Mahayana Buddhist, which is the Buddhism of Japan, Taiwan, and Tibet, then the goal you're ending up, you know, the end of this path is your achievement of what they refer to as Buddhahood. Bud implies the eradication from your mind of all ego and all neuroses. The bird needs two wings, wisdom and compassion. That's the achievement of the wisdom wing. And they've got the compassion wing, and the second syllable da implies a development to perfection of all the goodness and clarity and kindness and love and compassion. So this is the two, you know, you've achieved the two wings of a bird. You become a Buddha. And the Buddha would say that's the potential we all have. That's the potential. Enlightenment, Buddha, these words, they refer to this potential of our own mind. That's exactly what Buddha said. Buddha, so and a good point. I mean, only one person has ever asked me this question, but it's a really good question. He said, who revealed these teachings to the Buddha? Which is a really good question. But it totally comes, doesn't it, from the assumption of a religion that implies a creator. Information from on high. It's and that's our usual view of religion, isn't it? Religious philosophy. Coming from a superior being, God, you know, who then reveals the teachings. Who revealed the teaching to the Buddha. Well, I said to this fellow, he just happened to be a scientist, and I said to him, would you ask Einstein who revealed, you know, the teachings about relativity to him? And of course, he laughed, and one laughed. And of course, he wouldn't ask that question. And that's the point, because Buddha's like that. That's the shock. That's the big shock. It sounds shocking to us to hear that, you know, because we assume up high assumes, you know, creator. There's a general idea, isn't there, of a creator of the universe who's the boss. No view like that in Buddhism, no view. But interestingly, an event this morning I was at, the Lama then said that the Buddhist view, which is quite unique, and it's quite shocking if you're a Christian, it would be very shocking or a Hindu or a Christian, that what is called the perfection of what's called God, infinite wisdom, infinite clarity, infinite compassion, which is given to the creator, Buddhism would say everyone has that same potential, everybody. I gave a talk at the university, the Catholic University in Melbourne years ago. It's my city in Australia. And I had a 20-minute slot in this conference. And my talk was the similarity between the definition of God and Buddha, or the differences between. And the essential point is those qualities of infinite wisdom, infinite compassion, infinite power, those three, which are said to be the qualities of a creator, are actually said to be the qualities of a Buddha. The difference is that Buddhism would say everybody has that potential, which sounds quite shocking, because I mean, you would never dare say you can become God. That's the worst sin possible. But this Buddhism is different, because Buddha has no view of creator. So this is a major point, you know. There's so much similarity, I would say, between all the religious philosophies. You can find many similarities, including in just all good ethics. There's so much similarity. That's a fundamental difference. So Buddhism asserts the possibility of perfection. That sounds very peculiar to us. Perfection. The eradication of all the neuroses and all ego, and the development to perfection of all goodness, speaking very simply. So that's the long-term goal. So if you're committing to a path that leads you to that Well, that's what being a Buddhist means. So obviously you can't, like if you commit to you like Einstein, you hear he tells you about relativity, you like the idea, you look into it, and you think, I'd like to know that too. So you commit to learning about it. And where do you start? You start at 1 + 1 is 2, don't you? You can't leap into relativity. That's, postgraduate. So you start at the beginning and you follow your path. And that path is, and Einstein says, this is my methodology. This is what I have done each stage of the way to get there. So Buddha's the same. Here's my methodology. This is what I have done to achieve that. And if you want to achieve the same thing, that's what you do. So it's very simple in a way. The principle of it, it's not confusing. It's not mystical. So obviously you can't you can't verify everything Einstein says just by reading about him. It's clearly not possible. The only way you can verify is by experiencing what he said one step at a time. Same with the Buddha. But you can do some fundamental checking. You should check the Buddha himself, check the teachings, check the history, who he was, and especially you check over the centuries, the people who also followed that methodology. You check on the practitioners of it. This is surely a reasonable thing you do. If you hear about acupuncture for the first time, that's what you do. You hear about tennis for the first time, that's what you do. You check up and have some confidence in the people who present this. This is reasonable, common sense. So then at some point you feel, I'd like to engage more formally in this path. And that's when taking refuge comes in. You formalize that. It's a kind of 5-minute ceremony. But the onus is on us individuals to do our research, basically. And when we are confident, we would then request somebody. So what is it so refuge means relying upon. You rely upon. If you take refuge under an umbrella, and when it's a rainy day, you rely upon the umbrella to protect you. So that's the concept of refuge. So whom are you relying upon? Well, they talk about the 3 jewels. It's a very sweet term they use. Can we close the door? Do you mind? It feels like keeping the energy in the room. You're taking refuge, you're relying upon, expressing your reliance upon the Buddha, his teachings, and fellow practitioners. So same, if you decide to play tennis, you rely upon Federer, you rely upon his methods, and you clearly need people to play tennis with. A spiritual community, community. So here, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. So they talk about absolute Buddha, abstract sounding, and that's referring actually to enlightened mind. So this is, if you've heard Buddhist teachings before, you'll understand this, but it's good to repeat it. This is where the fundamental point in Buddhism is not discussing a component of us called a spirit or a soul. He doesn't use those words at all. He says we have a mind or a consciousness. He says it's not physical. It's not the handiwork of a creator or of mummy and daddy. It's not a function of the brain. The brain, it exists independent, certainly at a gross level, upon a decent working brain. It's not itself the brain. Mind or consciousness is not physical. Doesn't come from someone else. It's the word used to refer to our capacity for cognition. We have sensory consciousness, we have mental consciousness, and that's where the workshop is, as Lama Zopa says. So the job of being a Buddhist, really, when you really get into the nuts and bolts of it, is to learn to become intimately, profoundly, deeply, profoundly familiar with the intricacies of the workings of your own mind. And this goes to incredibly subtle levels. Buddha asserts much subtler levels of cognition, mind, consciousness, than are posited in materialist philosophical views. This is a radical difference. That level of mind doesn't depend upon brain. It's not called a soul. It's still called mind, but at a subtler level. And we can learn to access that through these brilliant techniques that these Indians more than 3,000 years ago invented. As the Dalai Lama says, these genius Indians were the ones who began the investigation into the nature of self. Buddha came out of that system. This single-pointed concentration, it's called, this brilliant psychological skill that enables us to focus the mind to a subtle level, so subtle that we don't posit it. It sounds like science fiction to us if we read about it from the neuroscientific point of view. So then the mind, so this mind of ours too, if it's not coming from a spirit, if it doesn't come from if it's not the handiwork of someone else. If you're a Christian or a Muslim, God gave you a soul. If you're materialist, mummy made you. There's always somebody else playing the role, but not for the Buddha. And again, it seems peculiar to us initially. But your consciousness, it's words referring to the entire spectrum of your inner being. So you can talk about it being now, your thoughts and feelings and emotions, now what's there. So to unpack and unravel those. And why would you? Because if the end result is to get rid of all the rubbish parts of your mind, the voices of ego, which cause you suffering and cause you to harm others, and if the goal is to achieve to perfection all the goodness, then you'd better learn to distinguish between them. That's really when the essence of becoming a Buddhist is. You learn to know your mind intimately and can distinguish between the neuroses and the virtues, and then learn to lessen the first lot and grow the second lot. Essentially, that's it. So that's one way of talking about the mind. Then the other one is, you can talk about the mind being like a river of mental moments. That because the Buddha would assert it does not come from a superior being, it doesn't come from mummy and daddy. So the obvious question is, well, where does it start? Well, surprise, surprise, it didn't. It can't. And there's another whole powerful discussion, because Buddha would say the law of cause and effect runs the universe. And so mind being a product of cause and effect, there can't be by definition of first anything, there can't. So energy and matter and universes and minds, Buddha would say, go back and back and back and back and back and back and back. So just generally speaking, your consciousness comes from a moment before conception, and it was in a previous body before that, and it was a previous body before that, and so on and so forth. So that's where the difference in the Buddhist perspective. You don't come from a superior being. No one made you. So if you look at the view of karma, which runs this mind of ours, as Dalai Lama says, it's like self-creation. Because this law of karma implies that everything we think and do and say produces the person we become. We're the boss. We're our own creator. So these are the general ideas that are unique to the Buddha, the Buddhist approach. So even though you can't prove, until you're highly evolved and got subtle levels of mind through meditation and have now got clairvoyance, you can't prove yourself experientially that your mind came from a previous life, but that's what we're positing here. But you can learn the theory of it, and you have to start with theories first. You got to learn music, you got to learn theories first. You want to learn, even you want to add 1 + 1 = 2, got to learn the theory first. It starts with the mind, the thoughts, the theory. So then being a Buddhist, you look into the Buddhist theories, you look into the Buddhist ideas, look into the principles of Buddhism. You can't by definition prove it right there, but you can at least see maybe you see something coherence there and it appeals to you and something reasonable. You should check and be confident this person, Buddha person, and people since then, the practitioners, are kind of valid. There's a valid basis there. There's a valid kind of path there. When you have some confidence in that, then you take refuge. You decide to formally commit. So you're taking refuge in the Buddha. The Buddha, the absolute Buddha is referring to enlightened mind. So we can get the idea. I know when I was a Catholic and I was a girl, I loved the idea that God is everywhere. I don't understand it, but I liked it. The vastness. Buddha's view is exactly the same. Consciousness being not physical. Right now, it's kind of stuck in our body because our mind is driven by the neuroses, driven by self-grasping, driven by all the neurotic states of mind, which narrow our mind down. And we're intensely locked into this body with enormous attachment. But as we progress spiritually, you lessen attachment, lessen aversion, lessen ego grasping. Literally, you expand your consciousness. And then as you get single point of concentration and you access subtle levels, your mind becomes way more powerful. And literally, you expand your capacity for cognition. It's the only way to put it. Eventually, you can learn to see the past, you can see the future, you learn to see other minds, because subtler levels of our mind can cognize phenomena that are subtler than the usual way we see things. This is how they talk, So enlightened mind, fully developed mind, being not physical and being no longer encumbered by neuroses, how can it not be wherever there is existence? So it sounds cosmic, but it's kind of logical. So that's enlightened. Enlightened mind pervades wherever there is existence. There are countless beings who have achieved this enlightened mind. Once you become an enlightened being and I become an enlightened being, we're the same enlightened mind, if you like. Kind of don't bump into each other in the sky, Sort of like that. A bit sounds weird, but get my point. So enlightened mind, this is the actual Buddha. but we can't access that. We're too gross. So out of compassion, driven by compassion is why a person becomes a Buddha, because they're driven by this compassion to help others. So they then manifest in bodies. So then relative Buddha is Mr. Buddha of 2,500 years ago, whose teachings we learn about, who've presented the teachings 2,500 years ago, roughly speaking, in India, and that have been practiced over the centuries, and whose teachings we are now studying and practicing. That's the relative Buddha. So then you've got the dharmas, the dharma, the spiritual teachings of the Buddha. Well, the knowledge, if you like. Well, that actual spiritual knowledge, where does it exist? The absolute knowledge, absolute dharma is within that mind of that enlightened being. Like if you think of music, I always think of music as an example. Bach, the actual music, think about this, the actual music is in Bach's mind. That's where the music exists. But then we can't access his mind. We're not clairvoyant. So out of kindness, he writes it down on pieces of paper with this unusual language, with little notation, all those little lumps and things and lines and twinkles, isn't it? Called musical, whatever the musical language is. So he writes it down. So, and the same thing for the Buddha. We can't access his mind. We can't access his knowledge, which is the absolute Dharma. So out of compassion, he speaks in that form he takes, which is looking like you and me. He speaks words that we can hear because we're at a gross level. That's the relative Dharma. And that's what we rely upon most. That's what we rely, that's the main refuge. That's what's held in, that's what's kept in this, from the speech of the Buddha. They talk about the power of speech. Buddha's main gift to us is his speech. The words that express what's in his mind, which is the advice that we take and apply to ourselves. That's the relative Dharma. So we're relying upon the absolute Buddha, relative Buddha, absolute Dharma, relative Dharma, relying upon. And then there's this Sangha, the so-called Sangha, or spiritual community. Well, the actual, they call the absolute spiritual community is actually referring to the beings who have that holy knowledge, not just Buddhas, but anybody who's from the time they've achieved the realization of emptiness, or the Arya beings, up to Buddhas. That's the actual spiritual community, those who have that knowledge. But you can't recognize who they are. Could be the homeless person down the road, could be your smelly uncle around the corner you don't like. You don't know who people are. They could be actual Arya beings, superior beings, the actual Sangha, but that's what's hard to recognize. So then out of the relative Sangha, and this is in the Buddhist tradition, this has happened since the time of Buddha, the relative Sangha, spiritual community, are represented by people living in the fullness of the vows of Lord Buddha's teachings. They call it the Vinaya, all the different instructions, of the rules and things, like rules and ways of living together, behavior type things, called vows. You live in a house together with several people and you agree upon certain behavior. We don't sleep in each other's beds unless we're invited. We will wash the dishes, clean the toilet. There's a few kind of things we agree upon. So it's like, if you like that, like vows. So there's vows, and certain kinds of vows of behavior, and so on and so forth. So the relative Sangha. So for the Buddha, he has said that in any one place, the presence of 4 fully ordained people living in the fullness of these vows, fully ordained monks or nuns, that's the criterion of the existence of the living Dharma in that place. 4 they say. Yeah, so that's the relative Sangha. So that's why among, in Asians and Tibetans and others, we have great respect for people living in the vows, so they say, representing the living Dharma, like a symbol of the living Dharma. That's the Buddha Dhamma Sangha. That's the meaning of, so you're relying upon those 3 jewels, as they say. You're taking refuge in the Buddha Dhamma Sangha. That's how they say. So that's that. So then the second piece is where we take vows. We'll go into that in a moment. But before I go further, that's the meaning of, literally, the literal, simple meaning of formalizing your refuge in the Buddha Dhamma Sangha. So does anyone have any questions about that? If you're planning to take refuge, then if you do have questions, you need to be clear, That's the first point. We're going to say more things soon. Are there any questions about all that? If you are planning to take refuge or renew your refuge vows, you can renew your refuge commitments, I mean. Okay, so one other point that, yes. Where? Oh, yes, go, sweetheart.
What is the karmic benefit in taking refuge and vow? And also,
what is the what?
Karmic benefit.
The benefit. Okay, then, and then?
And also, if you have taken vows before, and if you have taken refuge before, and when you renew taking refuge, so when you take the refuge vow, do you cleanse the previous vow?
We're not discussing vows yet, we're discussing refuge first. Okay. Refuge is the first one. So the benefit. Okay. It's a very simple question. I think in one way the answer is very simple. If you decide you like tennis, and then you decide you're going to commit to learning tennis, like you go to Federer, please can I, please show me how to play tennis, and you book up in his little club, and you rely upon Federer and his methods and his community. What's the advantage to you of that?
Become a tennis expert.
Thank you very much. Well, here the same thing. It's just logical, something mysterious. And I think that whenever we commit to something, that means as soon as you decide to do something, I think then we will do it. You understand? Yeah. So in other words, it's like you commit to go on a diet. What's the advantage? Is because you've committed, you're going to do it. So I think that's, in a way, it narrows it down. Do you understand? So that's why you've got to check carefully if you want to be a tennis player, you want to be a Buddha, not just jump in. I think it sounds cute, I might do it, Do you understand?
Yes.
So, okay, that's the very first piece. Then there's other pieces about refuge. Okay. One piece is important too, is you're taking, you can do this in your own mind, of course, but the way it's formally done, this is coming back to the time of the Buddha, replicating that, but you take it in front of somebody. So that person, like I said, in this case, is going to be this person in this chair here. But whoever you take refuge with, it's really you're taking, you are the one who's relying upon the Buddha Dhamma Sangha. So you are the one who's relying upon the Buddha and the Buddha's Dharma and the Buddha's Sangha. Not taking, so you could say you're taking refuge in the Buddha, taking refuge in the Dharma, but you're the one who's committing to yourself that you're going to rely upon that. And a person is here representing the Buddha. So then if you're going to do that, then you need to have some confidence that that person, you've checked on Buddha, you've checked on his teachings, but it would be useful, I'd suggest that you have some confidence that the person in front of you, you have to decide you want to take refuge with, not in, but with that person. That you're happy to practice the view that that person is representing Buddha for you, speaking it very simply. That's an important part of it. You choose the person. You don't just look up and go, oh, someone's taking refuge, I'll do it. Someone's giving refuge, I'll take it. You should be confident in that person. That's really important because we develop a relationship, I say it, I was like, I like become your godmother, if you like. I was a Catholic, So there's meant to be a special kind of relationship, and I have a responsibility to help you on your path. And I would tell you that I will commit to that, and you're going to have me till enlightenment. I'm sorry, you can't get rid of me. So I'll do my job best I can. You understand? But you've got to have confidence in that person, and that's very personal. And that's your decision. You understand my point? You need to have checked up on this person. They're not completely wacko, and so on and so forth. Do you understand? That's an important point. That means, we'll develop a relationship, and that some people develop a close relationship, some people not so close. But I find for myself, having a teacher in your own, even if I don't see them that often, I can count on two hands the number of meetings I had with my main teachers, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, in 45 years, maybe three hands. So the real work is internal, is your practice. But it's good to know there's someone there. And especially if you think of them as the Buddha, it gives you some courage. It's a very internal thing. Do you understand what I'm saying, people? It's very helpful for the mind because we're human beings. We have a human heart. And it's nice to have someone we can rely upon or think about or use as a reference point. Do you understand? It's just, we're human. It helps. Do you understand? So you better like that person. It's important. Obviously. Do you like my point? And that's your business, not mine. But I'll do my job if you do decide. Do you understand? That's a promise. And there's that's component. And the other component, there's commitments, basically. We're going to be shaking hands on it. And I'm going to pass it on from the Buddha and give to you, and you're going to internalize it. And you're going to commit to a few things. Because I think, again, we are human and we need discipline. So you've got a half a dozen commitments in relation to taking refuge. We haven't discussed vows yet. So then that next one is then you're committed. I'm going to sending you, after this ceremony, if you do take it, you're going to email me and I'll send you a document with all this stuff in it and practices and things and so on and so forth like that, explaining it all. But there's a couple of things you're committing to. One is you're committing in relation to Buddha, refuge in the Buddha, you're committing to kind of respect any image that is the Buddha, or even a kid's drawing, a $1 million statue, you know, whatever it might be, you when you see it, it reminds you. To remind you of what you're trying to accomplish, so that for that reason you would respect that image, which has a lot of sense. It's not meant to be superstitious, you know. It's a reminder. It's really helpful. If you love Federer, you have a picture of him, a poster or something, wouldn't you, or a video or something, you know. Do you understand? As I said, it's very helpful for the mind. So you respect that image. Any image. I always tell the story about my sister. Tibetans are really keen on the one of respecting the images of the Buddhists. They put them way up high, you know. And it's kind of logical, because if you have a photo of your beloveds, your family, and someone chucks them on the floor or sits on them, you'd be very offended, you know. You know it's not your sister, but it represents your sister, so you'd respect it in a nice frame. Or indeed, if you get divorced, you take the husband out and stick him in the drawer. That's because you don't respect anymore. That makes sense, you know. Do you understand? So it has logic to it. And the second one, you're in relation to Buddha, so you're respecting, have an attitude that this is the Buddha, even though, you know, it's a picture that it represents Buddha for you. So it's kind of meaningful. You have a commitment to respect then all the words, the teachings. It's not just a book anymore. That means a video, that means your phone. You know, there's a Dharma in there. And that's your most precious thing. And it's a really nice attitude to cultivate, because you rely upon that. If you never heard the words, if you never read them, you wouldn't know what to think. It's the same as anything, tennis or cooking. Don't make it just to do with spiritual. It's reasonable. If you're a cook, I guarantee you really respect your cookbooks. Do you understand what I'm saying? You value that information. So that's the attitude. And that really does help the mind, you know. And the third one is you respect anybody who lives in the vows. This is not very comfortable in the West. And we think, oh, we're democratic. What do you mean they're more, I should respect them because they're in a red dress, you know. But somehow because they represent the living Dharma. That's the attitude. So you have those commitments, attitude, but also you commit to take refuge. There's a little formula, a little prayer, or longer or shorter, 3 times in the morning, 3 times at night. It's reasonable to remind yourself. Because if you forget that you committed to go to play tennis, you won't even bother going. You'll forget. So it's to remind yourself, you know, you're committing to take refuge 3 times in the morning, 3 times at night. Committing to be at least to be nice to sentient beings. Don't harm them. Try and be nice. That means love them, want they be happy. You're committing to, committing to make offerings every day. Offerings is a very powerful thing. Buddhists really like the concept of making offerings, because you're the beneficiary of it. Because you offering something, you're the beneficiary. But there's a very nice little practice we have of the Tibetans, especially of practicing. You see these water bowls up here. Are they up here?
Yes.
Yeah. Or you can just have an offering every day, like a flower. And if you think about it this way, you know, you take refuge in the morning. You're committed to take refuge. You're not committed to sit on your bottom and watch your breath for 4 hours. You're not committed to do anything else. Just committed to take refuge in the morning and night 3 times. And you could also make an offering. So that means it would be very nice to have like what's called an altar, which is a surface, not too low down, with a nice image of the Buddha on it, your teacher on it. And these things they're formalizing, and it helps the mind, you know, it helps your mind to have it there. So you'd have a nice altar with an image of the Buddha or your teacher. You'd make offerings. If you know these water bowl offerings, you can learn it. In the document I'll send you, there's a little practice in there, or you just make one offering. So you'd start your day, you know, when you hop out of bed, before you do anything else for yourself, you go pee, maybe wash your face or something, before you go get your cup of tea, you'd go to your altar and you'd make offering to the Buddha. It has a meaning. It's got real meaning. It really has. It's very meaningful. You're putting your path first. You're reminding yourself of what you're trying to accomplish, and you put that first. You're the beneficiary of that, you know. Then you have your breakfast, do whatever. You're not committed to sit on your bottom and do a practice. You're committed to take refuge. It takes you 3 seconds and make an offering. And then the other one is, it's very helpful for giving up attachment to food. It's very nice. Again, you use the opportunity of every time you have a drink or eat, there's a little prayer you can do. You just say in your own mind, before you shove it in the mouth mindlessly, you think of offering it to the Buddha. These ideas. So if you have a Jewish upbringing, this is kind of weird stuff, but I know lots of Buddhists who are Jewish, or Jews who are now Buddhists. So, but it's important to understand the meaning. You're the beneficiary of these things. They're practices for your benefit. Don't think of, oh, I've got to make an offering to the Buddha, otherwise I'll go to hell. Not like that, There's advantage to oneself of these practices, and that's the point of them. So there's a few commitments like that, that's all. And then, so that's it for refuge. That's it for refuge. And you can just do that part if you like. The second component. Yes, please, now. Yes, talk.
The question.
Good. Come on. Yes, Melissa, sweetheart.
Hello, thank you for your time and
Good.
teaching. The question, I have 2 questions. When you were talking about the 3 jewels, the Buddha, Dhamma, or Sangha, when you were saying that it's a requirement for 4 ordained people, I hadn't heard that before. What is there symbolism or reason behind that? I mean, how did they decide on 4 ordained people to
Buddha decided. That was Buddha's deal. It's his trip. Buddha decided. So why ordained is because they live. Okay, this gets us to when we get to the vows now, but there's something very, very, very powerful psychologically about vows. And because of the Buddhist path, this is another point, Melissa. It's a good question. There's different stages of practice. Buddhahood is the final goal, and that's the Mahayana component. But before that, the first stages of practice are the teachings we share with the Theravadan path, the Buddhism of Burma and Thailand. And there, the goal, this is the wisdom wing, the goal there is to achieve your own liberation. Okay, to get out of samsara by realizing emptiness. Before that, you have to give up the delusions, and before that, you live in vows. So the ideal way of living out that path to liberation, not the path to Buddhahood, would be ideal scenario, the quickest, purest, best, perfect way where you give up sex, drugs, and rock and roll. You take vows as a monk or a nun, and you go to the mountains and you do your work and you get renunciation, then you realize emptiness and you get the hell out of samsara. That's the direct method. So then living in vows of renunciation is said to be it's like a really powerful expression of that path. So then the existence of the Sangha on the planet is the criterion of the existence of that path. You understand?
I do. And the second question I have is, I renewed my layman vows with you back in the fall, a few months ago. Are you renewing Bodhisattva vows today, or?
It's just the refuge lay vows.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's good. Thank you. Any other about refuge? Anything else about refuge? Refuge. Okay, so the second piece now is, if you'd like to, you can just take any or all of the 5 laypersons' vows. So to try and understand that, let's look, and so this will also help Melissa's question get clearer, the answer get clearer, is the incredible benefit of vows. I've got to explain it, because it doesn't sound like us. When we hear a vow, we just hear that someone says, don't do that, and you're naughty and you'll get punished if you don't keep it. We're very superstitious like this, especially if we've come up in a very fundamentalist type of religious approach. And this is a really important point to understand karma, the broader point about karma in Buddhism. It's a huge one. And I think in a way it's simple, but it's quite difficult for our minds, because as soon as we hear religious philosophical teachings, we think creator, and then we think boss, and then we think punishment, and then we think sin, and we think reward. We think of it in this very dualistic way, don't we? So as soon as you hear, you've got a whole bunch of vows, or like if you go into any job or anything anyway, and you see all these list of don'ts, 27 don'ts, you'd freak out and walk out. Because immediately it's someone sitting on top of you and watching you like a policeman and telling you mustn't do this. And as soon as you hear don't do this, we assume there's someone behind watching who will punish when we do it. With this very dualistic view, and we have it very deep in our brains, I think. So the Buddha's idea Okay, I always quote this again, same thing every time. But I remember asking a Catholic priest, Jesuit priest, what is a sin? I find these really important points to think about. What defines something as being a sin? He said what defines it as wrong, any action is a sin or is wrong because God said. That's the defining characteristic. That's really, really intense. And I'm not criticizing. If you have faith in a being who's called the creator, who runs the universe, because they made the universe for God's sake, and you and the rules. So it's obvious they're the boss. It is obvious that you're being, okay, the subtle level that brings you closer to God by doing God's wishes, not doing what he said don't do, you get closer to God. So it's got logic to it. It's very powerful. So by definition, a sin, like especially the heavy duty ones, like killing and stealing and lying and jumping on the wrong partner. You understand? The things we think about as bad ethics. They're wrong because God said. I'm not criticizing, but that's not Buddha's logic. He's got his list of 10 things as well. Same as Jesus, But you ask Buddha, what makes killing wrong? And I mean, I'd like just to ask people what they think. Tell me why killing is wrong, please. Why is killing wrong? What do you think? What would you say? What did anybody say? Just curious. What would people say? What do you say? Killing is wrong. Why?
You're depriving a being.
What, darling?
You're depriving a being of their ability to change their karma.
Well, even more simply, I mean, you're saying it hurts people, right? Would you say it hurts people? That's the answer. That's Buddha's answer. Guess what, folks? People don't want to get killed. Dogs don't like getting their dinner stolen. Somebody doesn't like having, being jumped on by the wrong person. It's sort of, in other words, we don't want to be harmed. And Buddha, that's natural law. He plays no role in that. I can't stress this point enough, but that's the point I'm trying to get at. The difference between God and Buddha. You can have God. I'm not complaining. But we think of Buddha as an alternative to God. Do you understand what I'm saying? Oh, he's just the same. Don't this and don't that and don't this. And we feel the same. I'm naughty and I'll get judged. We feel like we're being watched, Do you understand my point? This is such a powerful point. So this priest said there is some aspect of natural law, meaning people don't like getting killed, but what makes it wrong is because God said, and because God indeed is the boss, if you posit a creator. It's totally logical. But it's got nothing to do with the Buddha. For the Buddha, that's like saying, it's a bit equivalent, and this is what I find very interesting. We go to your doctor, and she says, don't smoke, Robina. And you say, why not? She does not say, because I say so. And that's how we're hearing religious philosophy. You get my point? Because I say so. She says, guess what, Robina? I've done my research and I've discovered it'll cause you terrible suffering. It's a natural law. It's natural law. This point is so huge that among the Tibetans and the Indians, they just gloss over this because they have the view of karma. It's for them something normal, but we've got to really think it through to hear. It's quite profound when you think about it. So what's the implication of this? This is the point. Buddha's saying, so this is the point. He says a negative action like killing, heavy duty one, is wrong because it harms another. But this is the point now. Why he exhorts us not to kill or steal or lie, and he does exhort us not to, just like Jesus, just like your grandmother, behave nicely, don't harm others. Buddha's reason for exhorting us not to do it isn't first because it harms others. That's too advanced. To know that it is an action that harms another is crucial. But the reason he exhorts us not to do it, certainly at this first stages of practice, is because guess what, Robina? It will harm you. And I think this is the hardest part for us to get in the West. What do you mean if I kill, it harms me? Well, guess what? The Buddha's deal with karma is that every millisecond of what we think and therefore do and say, think and therefore do and say, and they use the analogy of seeds. Buddha says, leave seeds in my mind, similar to that will ripen in the future as the person I become. So it's literally, as Dalai Lama says, karma is like self-creation. It's very logical When it comes to things like music, you produce the musician. You don't just say, I can play whatever note I like. It's nobody else's business. But you won't become Bach. Of course you can do what you like. Of course you can kill and steal and lie, but that turns you into the person you become. Of course you can go raging on the piano and make big loud noises. That turns you into the musician you become. We get that when it comes to music, art, cooking, but as soon as it comes to producing the person you become, we don't get this. Because we are convinced it's all about morality and moralism, actually, and we believe it's all dualistic and no one's going to tell me what to do and I can do what I like, because we think of it as instructions coming from on high. It's like punishment and reward. That's our own projection onto it. So we find it hard to hear the karmic view. And this is the point that we're getting to here about vows. So what's a vow? A vow is a decision I make to refrain from something. So if I want to lose weight, I decide I am going to eat less food, or less, whatever method I use. I decide it. And who is the beneficiary? Me. It's a vow I take to myself that I am sick of being overweight and fat and sick. So I am going to change my habits and I'm going to eat less cake and eat this and not do this and not do that. We admire that. But as soon as it comes to morality, we have a panic attack. Don't you tell me what to do. We hear it in a dualistic way. Buddha's not saying it in a dualistic way. It's the most profound piece of advice. Just like your doctor, you'd thank her for incredible wisdom that now you know why your lungs are hurting. You didn't know before. You don't go, oh, she told me I shouldn't smoke because she'll punish me with cancer if I smoke. You don't say that and then go home and then discover there's no doctor there and out come the Marlboros. Oh, she won't see me smoke. I won't get cancer. We would laugh at the stupidity of that. That's how we hear spiritual philosophy, spiritual practice. It's infantile. Are we communicating here, people? Yes. We've got to grow up, you know. Buddha's telling us, this is the part that we find so hard to see, that we produce ourselves. And what does that mean? Every damn thought counts. Your thoughts are what produce you. Then your body and speech, which are the servants of your thoughts, they just, you know, carry out the rubbish. So the starting point is, you know, Buddha's first level of practice before you even commit to anything. He suggests, you know, I've got a little list of 10 don'ts here. If you want to become a slightly better person, he suggests don't kill, don't steal, or take the ungiven, as Lama Zopa translates to Tibetan. And don't jump on the wrong partner. 3 things of the body. Why? Because they are actions that our body does that are driven by attachment and driven by anger. It's hardly rocket science. So they are actions that will harm another. But guess what, honey child? By doing them, you harm yourself. Because the point is, if everything I think and do and say produces the person I become, this is the meaning of karma. Not just this life, but then mine continues and you ripen, and karma ripens in 4 ways. Our actions ripen as a type of rebirth, as a tendency to keep doing the action, good or bad, as an experience of having it happen to me, good or bad, and as an environmental result, good or bad. So actions that are labeled virtuous, those driven by kindness, love, compassion, forgiveness, non-attachment, non-anger, actions based on those, they're labeled virtuous. A natural law, they are going to program you into a really nice person with really nice tendencies and who will have really nice experiences and will have a very delicious environment. I mean, we are the creators of the universe as far as the Buddha is concerned, which sounds pretty abstract to us, but that's the Buddha's view. We don't need creating by somebody else. It's a dualistic idea. So a vow, the Buddha says, I've read something in different places that they say the Buddhist teaching is that vows are so potent psychologically, they've got like a subtler physical energy that's visible to clairvoyance. And why are they so powerful? It's sort of logical. It's logical. When you just say, oh, I must go on a diet. Honey child, for 27 years, you'll never go on a diet. You'll keep eating too much cake. But the moment you say, I will go on a diet, that's a vow. And it goes deep into your mind and it programs your mind. It's like watching you on your shoulder and it'll guide you every time the cake comes. No, remember my vow. It's logical, you know. So the Buddha says that vows are so powerful, and Lama Zopa puts it, that when you have there's two scenarios. This is trying to show the power of karma, the presence of mind in the actions we do, which is then, and the strength, therefore, of a vow. So, for example, not killing, an action called not killing. Karma is created most strongly when the mind is involved, because the mind is the main player. You know, you could walk past a homeless person and have no thought to give any money. So you practice zero generosity. Your mind doesn't have any thought to be generous, and your hand does not go in your pocket. So there's zero karma of generosity, right? But what if a $20 note falls out and they get their $20? You still create zero karma because your mind didn't decide to give them $20. You can see the difference, isn't it? Because everything our mind does plays a role. And everything our mind doesn't do plays a role. So here we are. So the Buddha's view is that non-killing, non-harming, not in general, the nons are the starting point of good, ethical, virtuous behavior psychologically. The starting point. Forget about benefiting others and loving others and being. This is just not harming. Already is the first step. The main part of the first stage of practice in Buddhism is to refrain from harming. It sounds so kind of passive, but it's profound. Can you imagine the world decided not to harm? The world be a blissful place. The body and speech do the work coming from the mind, but you start this first level, entry level, junior school, grade 1 practice. The level of practice is control the body and speech, control our behavior, control the servants of the mind. It's a tremendously powerful practice. So non-killing, conscious, intentional non-killing, when you decide to do it, and there have to be 4 things in place for any action of good or bad to be what they call a complete action. So let's say in terms of non-killing, there has to be a living being there, like that ant. That's the first point of the 4. The second has to be your mind involved in it. And there are 2 parts. There's more, but this is the basic ones. There has to be intention, not motivation, but bare bones. Oh, I must not kill the ant. And then the second part is the motivation. Usually it would be compassion, wouldn't it? Compassion. So intention, I will not kill, and then motivation. That's the second component, the mind involved. The third one, you make sure you do the action, you catch the ant or something, and then 4, you release the ant. That's a complete action of non-killing. And then that puts strong seeds, if you like, or programming in your mind. And then we need bucket loads of those seeds in our little bank vault, especially at the time of death. We need lots of good, strong, intentional, non-killing karmic seeds just to get another human body. Buddha. So think about that. How many times today have we met a cockroach, an ant, or maybe an ex-boyfriend, and you've had to consciously decide, I will not kill them? You understand? That's the only time you create the karma of not killing, because your mind doesn't think about it otherwise. We're sitting here being very lovely people sitting here, but we're not thinking I must not kill. So there's zero karma of non-killing created, like that generosity person. There was zero karma of generosity, even though the person got $20, because your mind didn't decide it. So, okay, a vow, Buddha says, we take vows here, you know, when we do the refuge, the second who want to do, there'll be 5, we'll go into in a second. You can take any one of the 5. So then a vow, Lama Zopa says, which is this Buddha's teachings, is so potent because you've decided. It's like a person who's taking refuge and then taking vows is like using the Buddhism as their framework, is a person who's deciding, it's a pretty incredible thing, that I will be a non-harming person. I want to be a non-harming person on this planet. That's a pretty incredible thing to define yourself as, and you will commit to do that. I mean, you can say you take refuge in Jesus or whoever, same thing, principle, and then the vows, you're vowing to refrain from harming others. That's pretty tasty, you've got to admit, on this planet. A person who defines themselves as a non-harming person, that's pretty intense. So then you would vow. So so a person who's done that, who's taken the vow, and this is Buddha's vows coming from me, from the person back to the Buddha, unbroken chain of people, and you pick up this vow. And the little thing I say, something like, I will never, from this moment till the time I die, I will never kill, never steal, never lie. You repeat them, the ones you want to take. Then the vow in your mind stream, the way Lama Zopa says it, is like so powerful psychologically that 24 hours a day that you've got that vow in your mind stream, you're ticking over virtuous karma exceeds 24 hours a day. Whereas it's only when you decide intentionally, I won't kill, that you create any virtue of non-killing without a vow. So vows are said to be a no-brainer, you know. I mean, one has to think about this. But I think that the power of deciding something is really what this is about. You could quietly not kill all day because you don't happen to meet ants. You're not creating any virtue of non-killing. You're just using up your good karma. You're being a nice person. But if you know, then when you meet one ant, you decide, I must not harm. That's a powerful thought. Well, if you've got a vow not to kill, even when you're asleep, walking, talking, the vows are said to be so potent in your mind because you've committed, you've decided I'm a non-harming person who will never kill. Then that guides you. It programs your mind with non-killing. It purifies your tendencies to not kill. So it's sort of like it's said to be very powerful psychologically. I love the idea of vows. Are we communicating, people?
Yes.
So now being asked me some questions, please. Now ask questions. Yes, anybody? Go, sweetheart.
The previous question, when you renew the precept, like the refuge commitment and the 5 lay vow,
Yes,
do you cleanse the previous
broken. Of course, darling. I mean, first of all, it's not the only thing. If we've weakened our refuge commitment, you know, we've broken our vows, then typically in your daily practice, you're going to be watching all the time. You might, you know, you've vowed not to eat too much cake and one day you break it. Well, the sooner you grab it, the sooner you regret that you did it because you don't want the suffering and you make a vow to do it again. You fix it, don't you? But this certainly is a very purifying process. Yes, it is, definitely, darling.
And the second question
Yes.
is about the sexual misconduct.
Yes. I haven't gone to them yet, haven't described them yet. I'm going to go to the 5 vows soon. Okay, I'm just describing the idea of karma, okay, and the power of vows. Okay, so now, yeah, where? Yes, my dear.
Yes, hello.
Hang on, Jerome.
Sorry, I understand you're saying about the intention, so you said about giving money to a homeless person.
Yeah, if there's no intention and no motivation, even though the $20 drops out of your pocket and they get it, you don't create karma of generosity.
But sometimes if you give money to a homeless person.
Yeah, this is a different discussion though. This is not the same discussion here. I know what you're saying. That's why we've got to be wise in what we decide to do. You have to you should know a few facts, or you just simply decide I'm going to be generous today. I mean, there's a guy I know up in West Village, and I said, darling, what do you spend your money on? I know him. He sees me like, you know, he lights up because he's just found heaven because he knows I'll give him some money. And he said, well, I have to say it's, you know, it's, what is it? Crack cocaine. And you can tell, skinny as a rake, half his teeth missing. He's a maniac. So in one sense, I think if I don't give him then, if I do give him then, you know, you got to sort of don't be too much like a policeman. So, and the main one is it's a generosity in general is a great practice for oneself. But of course, one uses one's wisdom. Do you see my point? Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yes, darling.
Yeah, hello. So you mentioned a little bit about vows. You said how the Buddhists have their own definition of vows. How does that kind of teeter on the line of vows versus laws? For example, you gave an example of a diet, like a vow to get on a diet and stick to that diet. And
well, that's the analogy I was using in our daily life, right? We're talking
right.
here Buddhist vows. We're being a specific group of vows here called Buddha's vows. But go on.
Okay.
Question.
Yeah, so how does that teeter between having a law and a vow? Like what's the fine line between
having a law? What do you mean by that? Having a law? What do you mean?
So if you say, so if it's Buddha's vow, are you not supposed to follow it? Hence making it a law to follow?
Jorge, what did you say? If what?
If Buddha has a saying and it's a vow, are you, I know the saying is make sure it's gold before you take it as it is.
Make sure it's gold before you take it as it is. What do you mean?
Like a lot of people could say a lot of things. Buddha could have said a lot of things that did not, I guess, adhere to the masses, but you take what is gold and you take what you think is the best for you.
This is why, this is my point here, Jorge. This is why, you know, the Buddha having, he's sort of giving advice. His job is to give advice. He's this person who became a Buddha, and he's giving advice to people who ask him to please teach me how to become like you, Buddha. So he'll give them advice, won't he? So if you
Yes.
go to Federer and you say, can you please show me how to play tennis? He will give you many, 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 many rules and vows, won't he? He won't call them rules, and he won't ever call them vows, but he will be as strict as Buddha. He says, you mustn't hold your hand this way, put your foot this way, throw the ball that way. You'd have hundreds of pieces of instruction of Federer that you would, so you agree with me so far?
I agree with you, but I also agree.
But listen to me.
Yeah.
To finish your way, I'll answer your question. So you don't call them vows, but you know the reason he's telling you this is because this is the method that he has used to help him become a tennis player. So he is Buddha, and he's seeing that people cause harm to themselves by killing and stealing and lying and bad-mouthing and being jealous and depressed. For the Buddha, this is what he has discovered is the cause of our suffering. Actions we've done in the past that have harmed others, delusions we have in our mind, and these are what cause us suffering. Are you hearing my point? So then he says, well, this is what I suggest, what I have found to work. Starting point is at least don't harm with your body and speech. I suggest you don't kill, you don't steal, you don't lie. There's 10 little things he first gave, instructions that he's saying, if you try and abide by these, you will be the beneficiary, because you will stop programming your mind with crazy habits and you'll start to become a fairly nice, subdued person. So the direct core reason he tells us this is from his own experience, in exactly the same way that Federer gives you instructions of how to play tennis. These are Buddha's methods for how you can become a nice person. That's what's behind the vows. So if you can listen to that, see the logic of it, see how it is natural law, because you know that nobody likes being killed and stolen from, then you would happily agree with it, not just do it because someone says. That's the point you're trying to get to.
Right. And just to follow up on your point is, if it's so, if the suggestions are so reasonable and so valid, then why has nobody yet to go step by step in following all these suggestions?
A very good question. A very good question. So then what do you think the answer is?
The most important answer, I think, would be the difficulty of it. People are not willing to commit to it.
Pretty pie, you've hit it on the head. So why is it we all can see, even speaking normal life, we can all see that having a fairly healthy body is an advantage. You agree?
I agree.
And we all see one of the causes of ill health might be eating too much. You agree?
I agree.
And why is it so hard? Because we're attached to eating. Why is it so hard to have better behavior? Because we're attached to following our own cravings. It's hardly rocket science, Jorge. It's a really good point that you're saying, a really good point. So we really think about it and we take responsibility, then we will see the logic of it, you know. And it's as simple as this, it is hard. We can really see it's hard. Look at us, look at the world, you know.
I understand. And just to not waste your time a little bit more, so my answer to, like, how would you actually do this? Would you have to become a complete pessimist, but in a Buddhist way? Like, I'm doing this because I'm eating too much, I'm wasting too much money, I'm doing all of this stuff. I need to think about others about me. I need to benefit others. So
no, I think that's skipping ahead to high school. We're in junior school right now, Jorge. And the first point that Buddha's trying to get us to see is that, you know, in other words, if you want to go off and help the world become more healthy, you have to first know how to make yourself healthy. And that's the wisdom wing. You are the beneficiary of the first level of understanding nutrition. So you have to see the benefit to yourself first. And that's your first level. I'm sick of suffering. I don't want to be overweight. I don't want to get sick. You've got to see the suffering of you being out of control, jumping on too many girls or boys, killing too many people. You don't want that suffering for yourself. It's not guilt. It's not neurotic, it's practical. Then you can benefit to others. You've got to go one step at a time, Jorge.
Okay.
You understand, darling?
Yes, because most people who become very enlightened, they seem to have this backstory of, I'm not the correct word is like the degenerate background. Like some people came back from people who have killed their parents, who have
No, I
been
understand.
alcoholics. Yeah,
No, I
yeah,
know, they
this
have
is
stories like that. I know,
yeah,
but you know, maybe we can be normal people and become better too as well. I agree.
yeah.
I
Okay,
understand,
this.
Jorge. Good points.
Thank
Are we
you very much.
Thank you, darling, so much.
thank
Thank you. What else? Is there more there? Yes, yes, Sheila.
What comes to mind, like you're on the
We just have to keep our eye on the clock, don't we? Because you've got to be out of here soon. What time is it, darlings? Oh, we're fine. We're good. Okay. We're doing all right. Go on.
So, okay, so you're walking by a homeless person and the first thing that pops in your mind is that, ooh, they're icky, they're smelly, I don't want anything to do with them.
Well, that depends on the person's mind. It might be your mind. That's
fine.
okay. At least you're honest.
And then you realize, oh, you have $1 in your pocket and you turn around and you give it to that person.
Yeah.
So
Then.
does that like? is it
Oh,
like
come
a
on,
walk?
darling. That's extra good because you change your mind. That's good. You noticed your delusions and you noticed it and you counteract it. That's even better.
Okay.
Well done. Congratulations. Who else, people? Okay, so yes.
So what about karma in relation to if you experience psychosis?
Experience what, darling?
Psychosis.
Who? Psychosis. So that's a very big word we use in the West, isn't it? It's all very grand because it's in bloody Greek. All our fancy words are always in Greek. I don't know why, but never mind. So you mean a kind of crazy person. So give me a practical example, would you, darling? You mean a person who's out of control, who can't control their body and speech is what you're really saying.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of us. Would you mind? I mean, look at us and we overeat. We might not be called psychotic, but we just can't say no to chocolate cake. You know, we might not be called psychotic, but we can't say no to girls and boys. I mean, I remember one girl with Tinder. You just press a button. I thought that was really good. When I was younger, I had to walk around the streets looking, kind of seducing boys. Yeah, but then you just press a button. It's delicious. Since then, it was rather depressing because there she was, just getting dressed after having sex with this one boy, and he's on the phone looking for the next girl. So we're all psychotic, but just it depends on how crazy we are. So what's the question? Come right down to the question. What's your question?
Can I think about it?
No, you mean by if a person's uncontrolled, do they create karma? Because there's an assumption that they're not responsible because they're crazy. Is that right? Okay. No, I see what you're saying now. I get you. The fundamental point the Buddha's making, every millisecond of any mind, a monkey, a dog, a human, a psychopath, Mr. Hitler, Mother Teresa, anybody's mind, a human, animal, or anything else, by definition, every millisecond of what they think and do and say, every millisecond of what they think and do and say is the process of creating karma. And why are they thinking and doing, saying those things? Because they're programmed from before. This is a natural law. So everybody creates karma every second, whether you're a saint or a sinner. And so the whole idea is, this is why we've got to control our body and speech first. If we're miraculously wise enough to see the benefit of it, then it gives us more space to begin to have control over our mind, which is the real point. We do our best, you know. Do you understand, darling? So what we can do for people who are crazy or animals or ants, or we try to help people. Then that's why helping comes in. You've got to work on yourself, then you can help other people, you know. I mean, this crazy guy who's junkie, he's injecting, you know, crack cocaine to his body. I mean, nothing much I can do for him except love him. Every time I see him, you know, maybe give him $20 or not. But if he asks me to help him and to do what I can, do what you can for a dog, do what you can for your crazy grandma, do what you can for the little baby. You do what you can help others and not harm others at least. You understand my point, darling? Yes, and then yes, and then yes. Yeah, go.
My question is about somebody teaching about a week or two ago, which
Yes.
is satisfaction. So
Yes.
creating our minds to satisfaction.
Yes.
Thinking about it, it's very natural and easy to do this sort of selfish motive for satisfaction of, oh, let me habituate my mind to be satisfied so that I'm more satisfied.
Yeah.
I wonder if you want to talk about sort of the motivation of wishing it for others.
I know, sweetheart, but listen, this is the thing that really, it takes us time, I think, in our culture to get this kind of evolution of practice. So first of all, the level we're discussing here is the wisdom wing, which is the work to put ourselves together. It's like this is the wing of studying nutrition. And you are the benefit. There's not even a discussion yet about how to help others. But we know why we're studying nutrition in the first place is so we eventually can help others. But we've got to first see the benefit for ourselves. Are you can you get that point? You
Yes.
can't possibly teach music to others unless you know it fully and enjoy it and love it and want to practice for your own benefit. But we're so nervous about that because we think it sounds selfish. We're scared to think that in our culture. But this is the point that Buddha's making here in this first stages. He says we should be weeping in compassion for ourselves at the suffering we cause ourselves by, killing, stealing, lying, jumping on too many boys or girls, or even just stuffing ourselves with too much cake. Forget murdering and torturing. We've got to realize the impact we're having on ourselves. And we've got to have, that's what they mean by renunciation. It sounds so grand. When you only will give up suffering when you realize you're sick of it. And we've got to be sick of suffering. And it's not meant to be sort of be self-pity and all the rubbish. We've got to realize how our own uncontrolled body, speech, and mind cause us pain. Then you can begin to see, oh my God, we're all in the same boat. One step at a time, Do you understand?
Yes.
Yes. Hang on a second. Yes.
A bit of the continuation, I think.
Yes.
I'm asking very maybe stupid question. I was thinking, ruminating in my head, what is wisdom and how do I actually apply it or think, okay, here when I approached this or that situation, I really was like thoughtful and clever.
What's the question? I can't hear. Tell me the question.
What is wisdom?
Okay, darling, wisdom is very simple in a way. Wisdom is levels. So here the Buddha's point is this. We suffer because of our own neuroses, which cause us to harm others. So with anger, you hurt yourself right there. And then because of that, you hurt other people. And then you sow karmic seeds that ripen in further suffering. So it just keeps going to be a vicious circle. So the one consequence of being driven by anger is that it's painful. But the other one we have to eventually see is it blinds me from seeing reality. So when I'm angry, I'm distressed. And if I have my angry glasses on, I see you as an ugly, horrible person, and I have no wisdom whatsoever. It's the opposite of wisdom. So as I lessen my anger, one, I become less neurotic, and two, I see you more clearly. I see you more realistically. So wisdom is what comes as and when you practice working on your own mind. Can you hear that? It's a simple thing. Because delusions harm me and blind me from seeing others. When you're driven by attachment, driven by anger, driven by jealousy, driven by depression, you're living in la-la land. The world appears terrible to you. That's lacking wisdom, quite simply. Do you understand me?
Yes. There's I understood.
Okay, good. I'm very happy. Yes.
Cyril has a question?
Okay, second. Go. Back here, yes.
She was asking about psychosis and karma.
Yes.
And I'll keep it short. You have a person with schizophrenia, or they're like deep in fentanyl addiction or something.
Sure. Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
But do they have agency over their karma?
What, darling, what?
Do they have agency over their karma, or are they
No.
just like playing out?
I hear what you're saying. No, well, I mean, it's very interesting. Check the last time you had agency over getting depressed or jealous. You get my point? So to one degree or another, we're just driven by our past habits.
Yeah.
That's all. We're just driven,
Yeah.
It's clear. So this is why we have to slowly develop agency, become conscious, develop awareness of our mind, slowly make decisions. And they even say living in vows can purify at a deeper level these old tendencies,
It might not be in this life either for a person in that situation.
What, darling?
It might not be in this life either.
Well, we'll start making progress already. We'll continue to make progress.
Yeah.
So we have to at least become wishing to have agency, wishing to become aware. It's a slow process because we're mostly just
can't see, a person
Huh?
who's pathologic, person who can't see.
Yeah.
They're brain injury or that's just past playing out.
everybody. I'm just not talking the serious people,
Yeah.
but your tendency to eat too much cake is also just you playing out.
Yeah.
So it's all a question of degree. So yes, the more we can begin to, a person who's maybe not capable of realizing their own mind, that's very serious.
Yeah.
But even though with our relatively rubbish habits, we can begin to learn. And so we slowly lessen them by living in vows and by purifying every day, which is one of the practices we're supposed to talk about before we do the business. Then you begin to radically change your mind, and it's slow. Yes, Cyril. What's your question, sweetheart?
Hello, dear Venerable Robina.
Wait.
I have a technical question on the vows because you've said the vows.
I haven't
could be
finished the
some-
vows yet. I haven't begun to discuss them yet. I haven't said
Sorry?
them, Cyril. I haven't said the vows yet.
Okay.
So I'll do that.
Okay.
Go on. Let me say the vows first. Then you can ask your question, okay?
Okay.
Okay. So let me say the vows. Okay. The first one is the vow not to kill. And the main vow is to at least intend not to kill humans. Ideally, also, the secondary vow is to not kill anything. If you can aim to do that, is marvelous, amazing, you know. To have an intention, a serious intention. I do not want to kill. And the thing we've got to realize about karma is as soon as you even just have that thought, already it guides you. Already it guides you, you know. It's so powerful. So the first one is not to kill. Major one is you kill a human. And that means to break a vow, you have to intend, you know it's wrong, you know you've got a vow, you don't care, you intend to do it, and you have no interest in fixing it. So it's quite heavy to break a vow. It's got to be very, very conscious. You see my point? So sometimes it happens by accident, you know. You don't break a vow then. It's got to be intention, not interested in changing it, and being very well aware you've got a vow and not caring. That's quite heavy. Then the second one is to not take the ungiven, and a break in a major way if you steal something of value from somebody. And you break in a minor way if you take anything that hasn't been offered. And I think it's a really good practice because we take things, we don't give them back, we press a button here, get something free on the computer. It really helps you be conscious, you know. And then lying, killing. The third one of the body here is no sexual misconduct, which generally means if you've got a partnership, if you've got a commitment, you don't cheat on the partner and you don't take someone else's partner. Pretty much it means that. Then the next one is one of speech, no lying. I will not say words that aren't true. You break it in a major way if you lie about your spiritual attainments, and you break in a minor way if you say what isn't true and then you mislead somebody. So its intention has to be there, knowing it's a mistake, knowing it's wrong, that kind of thing. It's very strong to me, and this is all written down in this PDF I'll send you. It's very clear. It makes sense, you know. And the fifth one is no intoxicants, and you don't have to take all these 5. You can take 4 or 3 or whatever. But no intoxicants is one that, you know, means no intoxicants. It means don't take an intoxicant, which usually means alcohol and like heroin, that kind of thing, you know, or the other drugs that make your senses crazy, out of control. They're the 5 vows. So any questions about the vows now, Cyril?
Yes, dear Venerable, it was a technical question because you've said the vows could be seen on the continuum of someone by clairvoyant people. So I was wondering, how can we be sure that we have received the vows? Is it transmitted from mind to mind, or is it working the transmission?
No, Cyril, I don't understand the question. Start again. What?
Because you said the vows could be seen.
Okay, darling, I mean, no, please listen, Cyril. What I said was, just to show the power of vows, is that in some of the teachings they say that vows are so potent psychologically that clairvoyance, they're like a subtle energy that clairvoyance can see. That's what I'm saying.
Yes.
So the question is?
My question is, how can we be sure that we have received the vow? And
Because you intend to take it, Cyril, you're the boss, it's your mind. So if you're going to kneel in front and do your refuge, and I say the words, from this moment till the time of my death, I will never kill. And you repeat, from this time until the time of my death, I will never kill. Well, guess what, baby? You got it. Your mind is decided. So your mind has the vow in it. It is your mind. It's nothing mysterious.
Okay, thank you.
Are we communicating?
Yes.
What else, people? Yeah.
I read on London.
What, dear?
London.
Who?
London to more the great treaties on the stages of past.
Darling, can you please speak English? Just speak English to me. What are you saying?
The great treaties on the stages of the past to enlighten.
The Lam Rim. What does it say? What is it saying?
It's pretty strict about, like, it has to be your husband or like your.
No, darling, I'm telling you how I'm giving the vow here based on instructions I've received from my teachings. And I'm telling you, it means if you have a partner and you cheat on them or you take someone else's partner, it's the same thing.
So like, we don't need to care about the time and the.
I'm not discussing that. This is what I said, the vow is here.
Okay.
This is it, okay? This is the way I'm giving the vow.
Okay.
Yeah. It doesn't mean you don't have, I mean, you can run around, if you don't have a partner, you can jump on 24 people a day, morning, noon, and night. You don't break a vow. You just increase your attachment, but you don't break a vow. Okay, go on, what else? Yes, darling.
Robina, regarding intoxicants,
Things that make your mind crazy,
okay.
out of control.
That's
Come on, out of control.
Yeah.
It's clear, we know, you know.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what they say.
Verbal
Yes.
question.
Jorge, yes, darling.
Yes, hello again. The vows, is it safe to assume that these vows affect the soul? And when I say soul, I kind of want to correlate it with karma. Is that safe to assume?
Well, that's a bit complicated thought. Let me try and unpack what you're saying. The Buddha doesn't talk about a part of us called a soul. He
Right.
talks about Jorge has a mind. That refers to his intellect, his negative thoughts, his positive thoughts, his emotions, his feelings, unconscious, subconscious, and the much subtler level of your mind. If you go and get single-pointed concentration and you've accessed this subtler level, all of that is your mind. It's always your mind, Jorge. So given that,
Okay.
what's your question?
My question is, since I guess Carl Jung and Nietzsche said that the Europeans tend to have a more value on the soul rather than
I'm sorry, I
the
didn't
Eastern.
understand your. I don't understand your
Oh.
point, sweetheart.
So Carl Jung and Nietzsche tended to say that the Europeans have a more stable idea of a soul. The Europeans tend to care more about themselves and rather than Easterners like Americans, where do you think, the question is, do you believe that due to location, whether you're in Europe or America, people have a different value on the soul or on their karmic value, on their karmas, on their vows?
I find that the assumptions in your terminology there are a bit sort of hard to unpack, Jorge. I don't quite get the question. Karma is just a word referring to the natural law of cause and effect, such that
Right.
everything you think and do and say produces the person you become. That's all
Right.
karma means, nothing more fancy than that. It's cause and
Right.
effect. That's one point. Second, Buddha doesn't use the word soul, so I don't know what you're talking about. So therefore, in that, what's your question? I mean, you said self-centered. I think self-centeredness is common to the world, put it that way.
Yeah, so to put it in simpler terms, let's take the Middle East.
What?
They must not have, let's take the Middle East.
The
Doesn't
Middle
look like
What about
they're always at war. It doesn't seem like
It's
they're
just
having any
so
good.
that to do with where you live. No, humans are humans. We all have ego grasping. We all have self-centeredness. We all have depression. We all have anxiety. We all suffer, Jorge, because of it. I think I agree with you.
Yeah, so compared that to a different
Wait a minute,
country.
3 o'clock. We've got to be out of here soon. I've got a deadline. Yes.
Okay.
Who's talking there, sweetheart?
Hi, it's Lou and Jiva.
Oh, Lou, go on, talk to me.
Question about consuming meat products and
Okay.
having vows.
Okay, let me try and keep it short and simple. First of all, it is interesting, Lou, and you've got to agree. We always ask this question in terms of eating meat. I mean, I haven't yet had a person say, if I, wear leather belt or use silk or, do you understand what I'm saying? Because I think the reason why I think, Lou, is because we're very attached to eating food. So this is a really interesting point, I think the Buddhist view is there's not a millimeter of space in the universe where you won't find sentient beings. Our body is a walking zoo. Under our armpit is a zoo. Our entire mouth is an ecosystem of sentient beings. So just by walking, breathing, we are slaughtering countless numbers of sentient beings. Driving a car, somebody did the research when I checked up, it's like trillions of creatures are slaughtered just on the number plate of one car per kilometer per something. The number of beings who are slaughtered, like, for example, some scientist in Victoria and Australia got fed up with all the fundamentalist vegans and vegetarians, and he said, well, don't be so ridiculous. There was this wheat field outside of Melbourne where in the off season millions of little field mice were existing, and they were so cute. They sang love songs to each other. They were pretty little beings. And of course, when they had to put the wheat in the ground, 20% of which is for the bulls, for the meat eaters, and the 80% for the wholly vegans and vegetarians, guess what they did to the little mice? They slaughtered them, slaughtered millions, and not kindly. So eating meat is just one tiny part of the equation, Lou. Are we communicating, baby? So the point is, of course, to not eat meat, but with a motivation of compassion. We are the beneficiary. We might save a few animals from dying, so don't get too holy. And we get very holy when we become vegan and vegetarian, like as if everybody slaughters and we don't, but it's like hilarious, you know. So the whole point is the wish not to harm sentient beings, to do the best we can to have the wish not to harm sentient beings. So you can say, if you live in a vow not to kill and don't kill the ants and the worms and the dogs out of genuine compassion, but maybe you eat a lamb chop occasionally, it's just a no-brainer that your mind is genuinely more spiritual than a person who sits there fanatically eating vegetarian and won't even eat a bloody OXO cube out of fanaticism, you know. So we've got to be reasonable. Get my point here?
Yes, loud and clear. Thank you.
Are we communicating?
Yes.
So be vegan, be vegetarian. Best not eat anything, just keep your mouth shut. You understand? That's the only way you're going to survive. No, but you can't stop harming others. So it doesn't mean, oh, therefore it doesn't matter. It's what goes on in your mind, and a wish not to harm and a wish not to kill. I mean, one of my sisters never ate any meat. She never bothered. She never told anybody. She didn't tell anybody else about it. And I said, Jan, why don't you eat meat? Oh, how could I? I said, every time I see it, I see a cow. I only burst into tears. I don't know how compassionate, you know. That's when it's compassion. But she had to eat meat. She was sick, so she did it reluctantly. So it's got to be, it's the mind, and then the sincere wish not to harm. So of course you can argue that the meat industry is outrageous. It's destroying the planet, apparently. You can't argue with that. But it's a much bigger one than eating or not eating meat. It's far bigger than that, you know. Yes, darling.
What is mind?
The word mind or consciousness is referring to everything that isn't your body, your livingness, your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, your unconscious, your subconscious. That's your mind. They're the words referring to that.
Okay. Then what do I do if I think something and I feel completely different? So my brain tells me this is right to do, and my body tells me no, do this.
Well, I would disagree with both of those, because your body and your brain can't tell anything. Your mind makes a decision. Your mind has 1,000 thoughts a second, darling. And the Buddhist view is we can learn to have incredibly subtle, sophisticated familiarity with our mind, so we can begin to be in control of it, insofar as we can lessen the neurotic thoughts and grow the positive ones. That's the bottom line. And we increase in capacity to do that. That's being a Buddhist. And why? Because negative neurotic thoughts and actions harm you and harm others, and you're sick of suffering, and you want to become a more wise, happy, content, fulfilled person, and you want to be a benefit to others. This is a gradual process. And the mind is what does the job. And your mind doesn't come from mummy or daddy or your brain. It's not physical. It's beginningless and endless. It's a very different view. Do you understand?
Yeah.
Thank you, darling. So those of you who want to take refuge and renew your refuge and your vows, you're very welcome.